So get this, the Catholic Church actually offed people just for warming their homes this way. Not because they were witches or anything, just for wanting to stay cozy. But check out the crazy part. NASA engineers just looked at this exact heating trick and totally said it was perfect. Super good at saving energy, you know? So why'd those medieval big shots get so bent out of shape about it that they'd actually kill folks? Turns out the Romans were total geniuses. They came up with these underground heating systems called hypocosts. Basically, they just had these empty spots under their floors where hot air could zoom around. Pretty slick, right? So here's how it worked. You'd light a fire in a huge oven thing outside your house. That hot air would then sneak through tunnels under the stone floors, warming everything from the bottom up. Your feet? Super warm. The whole room? Nice and snug. No smoky mess inside either. And man, was it efficient. Just one of these Roman heaters could make your floors feel like 85 degrees, even if it was freezing cold outside. That's hotter than most people keep their houses today. But here's the wild part. Medieval important people knew all about this stuff. They could look at Roman blueprints, check out old busted buildings, even see some working ones in old bathhouses. But nope, they hardly ever built new ones. Why? Because hypocosts were considered too fancy pants, too Roman, even not Christian. And listen to this, those monks who were always preaching about living simple and humble, archaeologists found out they were secretly running these hypocosts in their own monasteries. So they'd be all, being cold is good for your soul, while secretly toasting their toes on heated floors. Talk about being a hypocrite, huh? Today's engineers did the math, and guess what? These Roman systems were about 40% better on fuel than just the regular old fireplace. Less wood, more warmth, and no tearing up from smoke. Your cool radiant floor heating now? It's the exact same concept, just with water pipes or electric mats instead of hot air. So yeah, we pretty much dumped a much better technology for centuries just because it seemed too high class. But heated floors, that was just a start. What about warm beds? Okay, your grandma probably used one of these, and honestly, she was kind of a mastermind. The bed warming pan. Super easy. You grab a metal pan with a long handle, fill it with hot coals, then just shove it under your blankets. Bam! In minutes, your bed goes from, I'm gonna freeze my butt off, to, oh yeah, cozy. We're talking a 20 to 30 degree jump right where you sleep. And the really clever part, you're not burning wood to warm the whole room, just your bed, right where you need it. I remember my aunt had one hanging on her wall like a cool ornament. Turns out, for her parents, it wasn't just for show, it was hardcore survival equipment. Those medieval bosses actually tried to stop people from using these. Not because they were bad though. Oh no, they worked like a charm. The problem was, well, fire. Hot coals plus dry sheets plus sleepy people sometimes equaled a big mess. Okay, fair enough. I totally get that. But here's what's hilarious. Electric blankets and heated mattress pads now, same exact thing. We just swapped glowing coals for electricity and patted ourselves on the back for being so smart. And the numbers made perfect sense back then. Why burn a bunch of wood to warm a massive drafty stone room all night when a few hot coals could keep you snug till dawn? Families with warming pans used way less wood. It was all about warming just you, not throwing energy away. Our ancestors were way more clued in about saving energy than we probably give them credit for. But those warming pans, not even the strangest way medieval people got warm. Not even close. Listen to this. One cow gives off as much heat as a 400-watt space heater running all night. That's not some old story. That's just how science works. Medieval farmers figured this out ages before anyone could even measure it. They built these long houses where the animals lived on one side and the family on the other. Sometimes the sleeping areas were even right above the barn. Heat rises, right? Instant free warmth all winter. The big shots hated it, called it disgusting, uncivilized, even not Christian. And listen to this, those monks who were always preaching about living simple and humble, archaeologists found out they were secretly running these hypocosts in their own monasteries. So they'd be all, being cold is good for your soul, while secretly toasting their toes on heated floors. Talk about being a hypocrite, huh? But steaking animals for their heat is actually pretty genius. So yeah, we pretty much dumped a much better technology for centuries just because it seemed too high class. But heated floors, that was just the start. What about warm beds? Okay, your grandma probably used one of these, and honestly, she was kind of a mastermind. The bed warming pan. Super easy. You grab a metal pan with a long handle, fill it with hot coals, then just shove it under your blankets. Bam! In minutes, your bed goes from, I'm gonna freeze my butt off, to, oh yeah, cozy. We're talking a 20 to 30 degree jump right where you sleep. And the really clever part, you're not burning wood to warm the whole room, just your bed, right where you need it. I remember my aunt had one hanging on her wall like a cool ornament. Turns out, for her parents, it wasn't just for show, it was hardcore survival equipment. Those medieval bosses actually tried to stop people from using these. Not because they were bad though. Oh no, they worked like a charm. The problem was, well, fire. Hot coals plus dry sheets plus sleepy people sometimes equaled a big mess. Okay, fair enough. I totally get that. But here's what's hilarious. Electric blankets and heated mattress pads now? Same exact thing. We just swapped glowing coals for electricity and patted ourselves on the back for being so smart. And the numbers made perfect sense back then. Why burn a bunch of wood to warm a massive drafty stone room all night when a few hot coals could keep you snug till dawn? Families with warming pans used way less wood. It was all about warming just you, not throwing energy away. Our ancestors were way more clued in about saving energy than we probably give them credit for. But those warming pans, not even the strangest way medieval people got warm. Not even close. Listen to this. One cow gives off as much heat as a 400-watt space heater running all night. That's not some old story. That's just how science works. Medieval farmers figured this out ages before anyone could even measure it. They built these long houses where the animals lived on one side and the family on the other. Sometimes the sleeping areas were even right above the barn. Heat rises, right? Instant free warmth all winter. The big shots hated it, called it disgusting, uncivilized, even like not Christian. And listen to this. Those monks who were always preaching about living simple and humble, archaeologists found out they were secretly running these hypocosts in their own monasteries. So they'd be all, being cold is good for your soul, while secretly toasting their toes on heated floors. Talk about being a hypocrite, huh? But steaking animals for their heat is actually pretty genius. So yeah, we pretty much dumped a much better technology for centuries just because it seemed too high class. But animals weren't the only living things cranking out free heat. Some medieval families realized that just cooking and making drinks in their kitchens could warm up whole rooms without burning extra wood. Oh, and medieval doctors? They were obsessed with bad air, or miasma as they called it. Thought breathing stale air at night would kill you faster than the plague, apparently. So when folks started putting thick curtains around their beds, the important people got nervous. All that trapped air, dangerous, unhealthy, maybe even evil. But nope, they were completely wrong. A 4-poster bed with heavy wool curtains wasn't just for looks, it was like your own little heating cocoon. Your body makes about 100 watts of heat when you're sleeping. Trap that heat with curtains and bam, you've got a warm spot that's 25 degrees cozier than your icy room. That's the difference between shivering all night and actually getting some good sleep. The really clever families didn't just use one curtain, they layered them. Linen closest to you so you could breathe, wool in the middle to keep you warm, and velvet on the outside because, hey, why not look cool while staying warm? Today's sleep experts have basically confirmed what regular people figured out 800 years ago. Snug, closed-off sleeping spots help keep you warm and sleep better. The bad air thing? Total nonsense. You'd need it totally sealed up to have oxygen problems, and medieval curtains definitely had openings. My grandma actually had heavy curtains on her bed right up until the 70s. She called it old-fashioned. I called it why her heating bill was suspiciously tiny. But curtains only work when you're in bed, right? What about the rest of the house? Well, some medieval builders literally dug down, and what they found was seriously awesome.
So here's the deal with medieval houses. The ones built partly underground were usually the warmest, but try getting anyone to live in one. The church called them pagan, rich folks called them poor people's shacks, tax collectors had no clue how to value them, so people just didn't build them, even though they worked perfectly. And worked perfectly is spot on. Just dig a few feet down and the ground stays around 55 degrees Fahrenheit all year. Doesn't matter if it's a super hot summer or a killer cold winter, the earth just keeps things steady. The Vikings knew this way back with their pit houses. Icelandic families built houses out of dirt that survived Arctic winters with fires so tiny you could barely heat a single pot of soup. The energy savings? Archaeologists figure 70 to 80% compared to normal houses. Seriously, that's not a mistake. 80% less fuel and you're still warm. Fancy architects now call this earth berming or earth-sheltered design and charge a ton for it. It's the exact same idea medieval regular folks use for free. I once checked out an old underground storage cellar in rural England. Middle of January, freezing rain outside, but inside, totally nice. No heat needed at all, just clever placement. The real smart part wasn't just digging a hole. It was realizing nature already gives you steady temperatures if you just work with it. Why keep burning tons of wood when the ground does the job for nothing? Okay, so talking about using stuff that's already around, the next trick involves something medieval folks literally breathed every single day. So, chimneys. Everyone thinks they were this super clever invention, but before them, people just let smoke kind of float around the room like a weird, hazy roommate. Sounds terrible, right? Well, medieval people weren't idiots. They figured out something huge. Smoky rooms stayed about 10 to 15 degrees warmer than rooms with chimneys that just pulled all that hot air right outside. See, when smoke fills a room, it warms up everything it touches, walls, furniture, the ceiling, and all that stuff soaks up the heat and gives it back. Put in a chimney and poof, all that good warmth just disappears up the pipe like your cash after a shopping spree. But wait, what about breathing? Good question. Here's the clever part. Fires were kept super small, like really tiny, and people would just hang out low, under the smoke. The warm air would go up, taking the smoke with it, while cleaner air stayed down near the floor where everyone was chilling. Plus, that smoke was like a triple threat. It stopped wooden beams from rotting, cured meat hanging up, and scared off bugs. One fire, tons of benefits. Did people get sick from the smoke? Yeah, sometimes, but old records show these families actually burned less wood overall. Smaller fires meant not as much smoke as you'd imagine. Modern masonry stoves and those fancy heat recovery systems, they're basically trying to get back all the heat chimneys just chucked out. Engineers spend big bucks designing ways to keep heat inside while getting rid of exhaust. Medieval ordinary folks kind of figured this out hundreds of years ago.
Okay, now for heat sources nobody expected, this one came from monastery breweries, and this is where things get a little tipsy. Making beer, wine, or even sauerkraut inside your house. Medieval big shots weren't keen on it. They thought the fumes were dangerous, and yeah, the fire risk from all that alcohol, totally legit. Plus, let's be real, the smell probably wasn't exactly pleasant. But here's what those rule-crazy folks completely missed. Fermentation makes heat, like serious heat. When yeast eats sugar, it kicks out energy, about 500 BTUs for every gallon of bubbly stuff. So stick a few big brewing tubs in your house, and boom, you've got a space heater that also makes beer. Monks figured this out fast. They put their bedrooms right next to the breweries. Officially, for easy access. Unofficially, free heat all winter. Those clever monks weren't just making ale, they were warming their rooms. A decent-sized brewing setup could warm up a room by 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a massive help when you're trying to get through January without any central heating. And the funny part, modern craft brewers actually have the opposite problem. They pay for cooling systems to stop their brews from getting too hot. All that heat has to go somewhere. Medieval peasants didn't have fancy temperature controls, but they totally understood cause and effect. Make beer, room gets warmer. Why waste that? Double win, actually. Triple. Booze, warmth, and that smug feeling of showing up all the people who said you couldn't brew indoors.
Okay, and speaking of getting heat from everyday things, wait till you hear how simple brick ovens turned into all-day radiators. Masonry stoves might be the most underrated heating brilliant idea ever. Seriously, check it out. You'd build a fast, hot fire inside a clay or brick stove, burn it quick, maybe half an hour, then let it die down. And that's where the magic happened. Those super thick walls soaked up all that heat and slowly let it out for the next 12 to 24 hours. One fire in the morning, warm room till bedtime. Boom. Now compare that to an open fireplace, which is pretty much a heat suck. Most of that warmth just shoots right up the chimney. You're basically warming the birds. They're cozy and you're freezing your butt off. Medieval stoves, they used a third of the wood and gave off way more good heat. I once tracked my own wood use, and let's just say medieval efficiency made me feel personally shamed. The Russians totally mastered these. So did people in Scandinavia. Makes total sense, right? When winter sticks around for like 8 months, you figure stuff out quick. Even today, EPA studies actually looked into these old designs. The result? Way less pollution than open fires. Cleaner air, less wood, more warmth. It's almost embarrassing how much better they were. The secret was thermal mass. Those big, heavy clay walls held heat like a massive battery. The warmth just gently drifted off them, evenly. No super hot spots, no cold corners, just steady, cozy heat everywhere. And yet, most of Europe kept using smoky fireplaces for centuries. But putting heat in walls is just one way. What about putting it in your clothes? Here's something nobody really talks about with medieval heating. The best heater wasn't in your house, it was on you. Ever heard of sumptuary laws? These were actual rules telling regular folks what they could and couldn't wear. Fur, only for the super rich. Sable, mink, totally off limits for normal people. Not because it cost too much, but because looking warm was a status symbol. So rich folks paraded around in their full-length fur robes while everyone else froze. A full-length fur cloak could make you feel as warm as if the room temperature went up by 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Seriously, no kidding, that's just science. And the smart people found ways around it. Wool layers, linen underneath to soak up sweat, heavy outer clothes to trap air. Medieval workers weren't stupid. They knew that a bunch of thin layers was better than one thick one. Same idea modern mountain climbers use now. The real genius, clothes need zero fuel. No chopping wood, no poking fires, no smoky air. I've tried this myself camping in winter. 3 good layers kept me way warmer than my buddy shivering by a dying campfire. He spent the night feeding flames. I slept like a baby. Medieval folks wore hats to bed. Not to be trendy, but because you lose like 30% of your body heat through your head. Workers would wrap their legs in cloth strips before long shifts. Smart, portable warmth. Your body makes about 100 watts continuously. That's free heat just waiting to be captured. But clothing wasn't the only portable heat source. Some people carried warmth with them in ways that seem almost risky today. Here's where medieval people got clever with low-tech solutions. Heated stones were the original overnight warmers. You toss a decent-sized rock into the fire, let it soak up heat for an hour, wrap it in cloth, and slip it under your blankets. 6 to 8 hours of steady warmth. No electricity, no batteries, just physics doing its thing, you know? But not all rocks were made equal. Back in the day, medieval people figured out that soapstone kept warm way longer than your average granite. They didn't get all the science stuff about thermal mass or slow energy release, but they totally noticed the difference and told everyone. That's basically how early material science started, folks. Just trying stuff out, messing up, then finding something genuinely cool. Then you had the real daredevils, taking it up a notch. Mix quicklime with water and boom, intense chemical reaction. Seriously hot stuff. We're talking burn your skin hot. Dangerous? Yep. Work well? You betcha. Some brave folks used tiny bits in containers to warm up rooms. Others even heated bath water with it in winter. Basically, it was like a medieval chemical hand warmer, except it totally messed you up if you weren't careful. Think of those hot water bottles or the little packets you squeeze for your gloves today. Same idea, just way safer and easier now. The smart part was realizing you didn't need huge fires to stay warm. Small, focused heat put in the right spots could do the trick with way less danger and wood. Oh, and talk about smart building tricks. Medieval architects found something cool about walls. Specifically, what happens if you build 2 of them? Here's a fun fact. Tax guys absolutely hated this. Builders back then figured if you put two walls with air in between, you could cut heat loss by 40%. No extra wood, no fancy stuff, just empty air doing all the work. And guess what? That's why some places made it illegal. See, tax people measured how thick walls were to decide how much a place was worth. Double walls made places look fancier than they actually were. Pretty sly, huh? So the big shots stepped in, saying it was a waste of materials or broke rules. But physics doesn't care about rules. Air is terrible at letting heat through. That's why it's such good insulation. A 4-inch gap between two stone walls creates a barrier that keeps the warmth inside, kind of like a massive thermos. The monks at Canterbury Cathedral were totally onto this. Their main hall had double walls, so it stayed comfy all year. Meanwhile, everyone else was freezing their butts off in their regular chapels. Today, builders call this cavity walls. Your house probably has it right now. We just filled the gap with foam or fiberglass instead of nothing. But here's what blows my mind. These medieval stoneworkers got thermodynamics just by trying things out. No thermometers, no engineering degrees, just watching and figuring stuff out, passing it down. They built insulation that needed no upkeep, no fuel. And here I am, still struggling with my smart thermostat half the time.
And talk about smart heat tricks. The next one turned big get-togethers into something surprisingly handy. Here's the deal with medieval lords. They weren't just throwing parties for kicks. Nope. They were basically running human-powered heating systems. Squeeze 50 people into a huge hall and boom, you've got about 5,000 watts of body heat. That's like plugging in 5 space heaters, only these ones also laugh at your jokes and say your roast deer is delicious. Lords caught on fast. Why waste extra firewood when your dinner guests are pretty much walking furnaces? The more people, the warmer the room. Suddenly, inviting that annoying cousin actually makes sense for staying warm. And it gets even better. All that breathing adds moisture to the air, and moist air feels warmer than dry air, even if it's the same temperature. So a packed hall felt super cozy without even needing to touch the fireplace. Modern engineers totally calculate this stuff now. Theaters, stadiums, concert halls, they all consider how much heat people will make when they design the AC. Sometimes they even need to cool things down because too many people show up. Medieval feast halls needed the opposite problem fixed. The really clever part? This heat was totally renewable. People ate food, food turned into body heat warmed the room. It's basically a living heating system. My grandma would have called that free money, and she wouldn't be wrong. Some historians even think where people sat wasn't just about who was important. It was about spreading the heat around. Put the big shots near the middle where all the body heat was, stick the less important guests near those drafty doors. Politics and staying warm all rolled into one dinner party. But using people to warm things up wasn't the only secret trick going on upstairs. Those black ceilings, they were doing way more work than anyone thought. Nobody ever tells you this about medieval ceilings. They were black not because they were painted, but from years of soot from cooking fires and torches. And everyone just figured, oh, dirty people, dirty houses. Nope, those sooty ceilings were actually pulling double duty as heating systems. See, dark stuff soaks up heat like crazy, and then it gives it back out. So when fires burned downstairs, all that heat went up, got absorbed by the soot, and then slowly dripped back into the room, like a giant heat battery hanging over your head. The science here is super clever. Light colors push heat away, dark colors grab it. A ceiling covered in soot could soak up heat from the flames and basically glow it back into the room for hours after the fire went out. Then everyone started wanting white ceilings. The bigwigs pushed for them. Cleaner, brighter, more proper. What nobody figured out was how much heat they were losing. Suddenly, all that valuable warmth just bounced right off those pretty white surfaces and vanished into the attic. Rooms that used to stay warm now needed way bigger fires. Modern engineers eventually caught on. Radiant ceiling panels? Same idea. Dark stuff that soaks up and releases heat smartly. We basically just reinvented what soot did for free. My grandma's old farmhouse still had those dark beams. I always thought they were just old and yucky.
Turns out, great-grandpa had a passive heating system running up there. But soaking up heat is one thing. What about keeping it in your food? Here's a trick your grandma probably used without even realizing she was an energy wizard. Hay box cooking. Super simple. You'd get a pot of stew or oatmeal boiling hot on the fire, then stick it in a box stuffed tight with hay or straw. That insulation kept all the heat trapped inside. The food just kept cooking for hours without needing another piece of wood. And get this, a hay box could cut your cooking fuel by 70%. 70%! That's not just a small hack, that's a game changer. But most people miss this. That slowly cooking pot wasn't just making dinner, it actually became a little heater itself. Families would put these insulated boxes near where they slept. The warmth from all that trapped heat would slowly warm up the chilly corners of the house. Two birds with one stone. Your mother-in-law would call that efficient. Scientists call it thermal retention optimization. Same difference, really. The church back then wasn't a huge fan, though. They worried about food going bad and making people sick. Totally fair point, honestly. Mess up the temp and you're growing germs instead of cooking dinner. But do it right, and it was perfect every time. Modern slow cookers work on the exact same science. We just plug them and make them foolproof. My own crock pot has saved my butt from so many cooking fails. Set it and forget it, right? What's wild is how medieval folks just got heat loss naturally. No thermometers, no science class, just watching and trying to survive. And speaking of making everyday things into heat gadgets, the next trick turned castle walls into something way more useful than just pretty pictures. Tapestries weren't just decorations, they were basically medieval insulation pretending to be art. Here's what most folks don't get. Stone walls are like giant ice cubes that think they're fancy. They suck up cold from outside and blast it straight into your room. Brutal in winter. So what did rich medieval families do? They hung huge wool tapestries, really heavy ones, sometimes over 50 pounds each. And the results? Amazing. Modern tests show these cloth wall hangings cut heat loss by 30 to 40%. That's as good as fiberglass insulation, except fiberglass doesn't have unicorns chasing deer. The air trapped between the wool and the stone made a heat barrier. Plus, tapestries stopped cold air sneaking through cracks in the walls. Two problems, one beautiful fix. But here's the annoying bit. Fancy laws and huge taxes made tapestries super expensive. Regular people couldn't even legally own the good ones. The government was basically taxing warmth. My grandma had thick wool blankets covering every wall in her chilly farmhouse. Same idea. She called it practical decorating. I called it brilliant after spending winters there and not freezing my butt off. That famous Bayeux tapestry? Not just a history lesson. It was probably keeping some Norman lord's backside warm while he checked out what his ancestors conquered. Monasticisms, though, they got extra smart. They'd order religious tapestries specifically made to fit the coldest walls. So you got your devotion and stayed warm all at once. Monks knew how to be efficient. And speaking of clever space hacks, what if you could make your sleeping area almost coffin-sized? Sounds tight, but the warmth payoff was amazing. Ever seen those old box beds built right into the walls? Those weren't just furniture, they were like survival pods. These little sleeping nooks with doors were basically closets you could crash in. Wooden doors would shut all the way around you. And the genius part was just simple physics. Your body's always making heat, about 100 watts worth. In a huge bedroom, that heat just vanishes into cold stone walls and drafty windows, totally wasted. But in a tiny space, barely bigger than you, that same heat piles up fast. Old examples show these nooks could stay 65 degrees Fahrenheit, while the main room dropped to 35 degrees. That's a 30-degree difference just by closing some wooden doors. I actually stayed in one of those rebuilt medieval cottages in Scotland once. The main room felt like a freezer, but that little sleeping box, super toasty. My own breath and body heat did all the work, no fire needed. The folks in Brittany, France really nailed these. Entire families had their own little boxes along one wall. Parents in one, kids stacked in another, like human filing cabinets, but warmer. And here's what modern architects finally realized. This idea works great on a bigger scale too. Japan's capsule hotels? Same concept. Tiny sleeping spots are way easier to heat than whole rooms. Why burn energy warming air you're not even using? The medieval answer was slick. Don't heat the room, heat the person. Make little warm zones right where it counts. And talking about boundaries, what if the heat didn't even come from inside your house, but from something rotting right next door? Okay, this next one's a bit gross, but also super smart. Compost piles, rotting veggies, decaying poop. Not exactly pretty, right? But medieval farmers weren't worried about looking fancy. They cared about not freezing their butts off. See, when organic stuff breaks down, it makes a ton of heat. We're talking 130 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than most hot tubs, and it keeps pumping out heat for weeks, sometimes months. So what did clever peasants do? They built their homes right next to huge compost heaps. Some even shared walls between their living room and a pile of manure. Sounds disgusting, I know, but it worked like a charm. The heat coming through those walls could bump up indoor temperatures by 15 degrees or more. No wood burned, no fire to tend, just rotting stuff doing its job. Now the bigwigs absolutely hated this, called it dirty, said it brought rats and bugs, and honestly they weren't wrong about the smell. But here's what they missed. These families stayed warm while their neighbors shivered. I actually tried composting a bit near my shed once. Middle of January, steam was just pouring off that pile like a hot spring. Pretty wild to see. Modern permaculture fans have totally rediscovered this trick. Greenhouses heated by compost now grow veggies all through brutal winters with zero electricity. Some clever folks even run water pipes through their compost to make little heating systems. Natural heat, free, renewable, and always there wherever you've got organic waste. But medieval folks found even weirder ways to hang on to warmth, and the next one uses something you probably have in your kitchen right now. Salt bricks. Not for your dinner, but for warming your bedroom. Medieval people figured out that big blocks of salt, when you heated them near a fire, could hold on to warmth for 12 hours or even longer. That's a whole night of gentle heat coming from just one warm block in your room. Why salt, you ask? Salt has this amazing superpower to soak up heat slowly and then let it go even slower. Regular rocks cool down in a few hours. Salt just keeps on giving, like that one uncle who never stops with the stories at family get-togethers. And here's another smart thing. Salt also pulls moisture out of the air. So these bricks weren't just heating rooms, they were also drying them out. Dry air feels warmer than damp air at the same temperature. Two awesome benefits from one simple block. Monks put heated salt bricks by their beds in the monastery dorms. Workers tucked them under benches. Some families even passed down carved salt blocks for generations, because the good ones lasted ages. The rich folks had fancy salt storage, so they'd heat up the bricks while they ate, then pop them in their bedrooms before hitting the hay. Bam! Wake up warm and cozy without poking out a fire all night. And get this, it's pretty wild. Those huge solar power plants we have today, they store energy in super hot melted salt. It's the exact same basic thing those old-timers figured out, just like mega size now. Basically, your local solar farm and some peasant's bedroom from the 1200s share a fundamental secret. Thermal mass just does the job. Grab the heat when you can, let it out when you need it. But wait, salt wasn't the only trick they totally forgot. Hay and straw? Dude, it was everywhere. Basically free, and super good at keeping things warm. The funniest bit, back then, the absolute best insulation was literally just dead plants. You know, hay and straw. That's it. Peasants just jammed this stuff everywhere. Walls, floors, their beds, even between the ceiling boards. And the rich folks hated it because, well, duh, fire hazard. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Straw works ridiculously well. Not despite it being simple, because it's simple. Every little hollow stem traps these tiny pockets of air that just sit there. And still air? That's like Mother Nature's best insulation ever. Period. A wall with a foot of straw crammed in? That's an R value of like 28. Just so you know, that's better than most modern fiberglass insulation. Medieval peasants kind of stumbled onto something engineers took forever to figure out. My grandpa used to say his family's old farmhouse was way warmer than the fancy stone house down the street. Rich people built cold, he'd laugh, and he wasn't wrong at all. Yeah, the fire thing was a real concern, but smart builders had tricks. They mixed straw with clay to make this stuff called cob, plaster over any bits showing, keep fires away from where people slept, and it cost practically nothing. After every harvest, farmers had tons of straw just chilling. Why burn expensive wood when you could just keep the heat you already got? Nowadays, you see straw bale houses all over the place. Cheaper to heat, good for the planet, super quiet. Architects act like they're geniuses who just invented it. Nah, they just found out what peasants were doing 800 years ago, all over again. But straw wasn't the only smart sun trick those old builders had. The next one actually grabbed the light itself. So here's the thing about medieval people. They weren't dumb. They just used what they had. And what did they have? Sunlight. Free sunlight. So some clever folks would build these little lean-to additions made of glass or oiled paper right against their south-facing walls. Basically a super old-school greenhouse stuck onto their house. The sun would just beam in, heat up that small enclosed spot, and warm up the next room by a good 10 to 15 degrees on a sunny winter day. No wood, no smoke, just basic physics. Now, glass was crazy expensive back then. I mean, really pricey. So most people just used oiled paper or animal skins stretched over wood frames. Not as clear, but still let light in, still trapped heat. Monks figured this out early. They'd grow herbs year-round in these sunny additions and heat their sick rooms at the same time. 2 birds, 1 stone, no fuel needed. The wild part, today's fancy passive solar designs use this exact same idea. Architects call them sunrooms or attached sun spaces now, and they'll charge you a fortune for the plans. Medieval peasants? They just called it plain old common sense. Some families even grew veggies in these lean-tos in winter. Fresh food and free heat. My grandpa would have absolutely loved that kind of smartness. He hated wasting anything more than anything. Today, the whole green building thing acts like passive solar is some totally new, groundbreaking discovery. It's not. It's just old smart thinking dressed up in fancy new words. So yeah, 20 heating tricks, 20 ways that just totally worked. And every single one came from people who literally couldn't afford to waste a single thing. Maybe that's the real point here. When you gotta make do, you don't just make stuff up. You become a genius.